I've been told directly, governments are in this process right now of continuity of government maintenance, if you will. That's about the best way I can describe it to you. Governments are buying all the same stuff we would want to buy so they can maintain the government or the continuity of it as everything else around it collapses. They need the same supplies. They need the food, the medicine, the repair parts, the motors, the machinery, the vehicles, the fuel. They need all that same stuff that we need. But if they came clean and told the world what was happening, now you'd have 7 billion people out there trying to buy the same stuff that all 200 plus governments on the world are trying to buy at the same time. There's going to be a lockup somewhere along there.
Yeah.
And people are going to panic, and they're going to stop. They're going to pull their money out of the banks, and the fractional reserve system is not going to work because there's just going to be too many withdrawals, and people won't invest in the stock market. And why would you go put into your 401k? I need the money to buy more seeds. Give me all of it today. So there'd be a lot of just institutional changes if they really came clean on the financial side of it. Forget everything else. And again, it shows you in the schooling system where the priorities lie. It seems that there's a concerted effort, at least in my own opinion, to steer everybody away from the basic knowledge of how these cycles are repeating, because it is such an integral part to keep our society functioning until the very last minute before the wheels fall off. Full thing about everything's stable, it's going to remain stable. We're at the 11-year solar cycle, not the grand solar minimum. Don't listen to those crackpot guys. Although the astrophysicists are talking about it, it's in all the peer-reviewed research. You got the top NASA people, European Space Agency people, Russian Space Agency, and everybody in between, even Piers Corbyn over there in the UK, talking about our sun's going into a very prolonged solar activity decline called a grand solar minimum. It's just established science. But they don't want people to look at it, understand it, because your spending habits are going to shift. You're going to move your spending habits greatly. They're going to shift gargantuan steps to whatever direction they're going to move. Once you understand what this is, your lifestyle is going to change too. You're going to start to take preventive measures. You got kids, you got family. You want to keep them safe. You're going to start buying a lot of different stuff. A lot of that money is not going to go into these traditional industries, and some are just going to dry up and die on the vine. Now, they're trying to prevent hoarding, first of all. They're trying to prevent artificial runs on the just-in-time delivery system and the manufacturing base itself. I've been told directly, governments are in this process right now of continuity of government maintenance, if you will. That's about the best way I can describe it to you. Governments are buying all the same stuff we would want to buy so they can maintain the government or the continuity of it as everything else around it collapses. They need the same supplies. They need the food, the medicine, the repair parts, the motors, the machinery, the vehicles, the fuel. They need all that same stuff that we need. But if they came clean and told the world what was happening, now you'd have 7 billion people out there trying to buy the same stuff that all 200 plus governments on the world are trying to buy at the same time. There's going to be a lockup somewhere along there.
Yeah.
And people are going to panic, and they're going to stop. They're going to pull their money out of the banks, and the fractional reserve system is not going to work because there's just going to be too many withdrawals, and people won't invest in the stock market. And why would you go put into your 401k? I need the money to buy more seeds. Give me all of it today. So there'd be a lot of just institutional changes if they really came clean on the financial side of it. Forget everything else. Just the way the financial system works globally would collapse if they came clean and people started to adjust their spending or not putting it into the traditional investment mediums because, hey, you can retire in 50 years, 30 years. Don't worry about that. It's coming now. So this is what I believe, that there's a lot of reassurances in the media that it's only 11 year and everything's stable. And I don't know if you see those same articles, but there's a full-on, full-court press here about everything's stable. Everything is totally stable. Back to work here in the U.S. media.
No, I haven't seen that actually. I haven't seen the. I've seen the mentions of it, but that's about it. That's just that's what I will search on the older with Hathaway. Remember the Solar Science Physics group talking about the solar minimum.
Yeah, they were more than 100% wrong on their predictions. Pretty much when you look at the predictions from the last solar cycle, John Casey's the person you want to follow. He's a former NASA space advisor as well. He was the only one who pretty much got it right in that 78 to 79 range. Everybody was up in the 120s. And again, when we come for solar cycle 24 predictions here, 25 predictions rolling out, they're completely. I personally feel that they're calling too high again. But again, it goes right back into that keeping society stable. If the solar researchers were to come out from NASA and European Space Agency and everybody in between, and independents, and come out and said, yeah, we are only going to 50 sunspots or a little less for the average,
So in terms
that
of
would verify we're going to do a grand solar minimum. So then people would really start to look into it and research just like you're doing. What is this grand solar minimum thing here?
So I'm just looking at this article here from astronomynow.com, published in 2015, and it talks about the diminishing solar activity will bring around a new ice age in 2030, published by the Moscow State University press release. And I mean, again, I'm only skimming the article, but yeah, it appears to be pretty much what you're saying there. There's an article here actually referencing a 1677 painting from Abraham Hardonis of the Frozen Thames, when obviously like London froze over during the 1600s.
That's what they're expecting again. Now, see, but the problem is they use that word ice age in that title. No, it's a mini ice age. It is not an ice age. So media watchdogs that you can only listen to them, and they're the ones who can tell you if news is fake news or not fake news. But again, there's a whole bunch of these in the scientific arena too. But they keep coming back and they keep using this word ice age. Stop doing that. I'm not talking to you personally. I'm talking about the writers of these supposed watchdog scientific sites. They keep again, it's this whole trigger word thing. They keep putting ice age. So as soon as you see it, what is the first thing that you think of? I say, hey, there's an ice age coming. What's your first thought?
My first thought is something like where the ice is like a mile thick and it's covering like a large portion of the Earth's crust.
Yeah, that's exactly what you think. And then what's your second thought after I say, hey, there's an ice age coming by 2030?
What do you think? That's going to take a long time to build up. That's probably not going to happen in that way. But I guess
and that guy must be a lunatic for even talking as such.
Okay.
Or girl. Or they or them or whatever you want to call them. People talking.
That particular article was by a lady, but yeah. It's a powerful subject. Like I say, it touches everything of the human existence. There's everything from the financial side of things, the economic side of things, but more importantly, the human side of things, isn't it? It's about how we function food, because we don't function in cold very well. We need food to survive. We need our energy. So it is going to affect the entire human existence, and it will change the world considerably. So in terms of this has been a pattern that is reoccurring, as you're saying, and we're talking about all the different effects that could have. I mean, so do you think that governments must know about this and are preparing accordingly, and that's why they're buying all this gear up?
Yes, and beyond that, the distraction, they're going to keep going so you don't look in the right direction. The distraction factor, as I call it, is going to keep ramping up until one day you wake up, literally, and you realize what has happened, and at that point it's too late. I believe that time is around 2021 of harvest season. So look for the bigger, more Hollywood-esque distractions. So far, how many distractions can you think of right now that people are actively talking about? I mean, the division in the Trump camp versus the rest of the United States, and the trade deal with China, and the possible tariffs with Mexico. That's the distraction factor in America for like just the general population. They need to keep everybody fighting amongst themselves, and that's like my simplest example. But what do you have on your end over there?
So in the UK, of course, the biggest topic on most people's agenda is Brexit. How we've essentially split from the EU, but we haven't really, because there's lots of trade deals that have already been signed into agreement behind that, like the EU Defence Union. The links between our military services have already happened. Our infrastructure is owned majority by European nations and countries, and by corporations that are obviously on the continent. So that I don't think that's factored into many people's consciousness, or they're not aware of that. They seem to think British Gas is still British Gas when it's actually owned by Centrica. They think British Telecom is BT when it's actually owned by Telefonica, which is based in Spain. So there's this whole idea where you can literally have an instant split, I think, is a sticking point. We now have Prime Minister has now resigned from role, so we have political divisions within each political party that are for and against, because they don't. I just don't think they know how to do it. And every political party wants to take over so they can make their grand vision come to fruition. But within each of those camps, there's lots of different divisions themselves. So Brexit is quite the mess. Then you have the situation with Ireland, which is Ireland is part of the EU. Northern Ireland isn't. So there's effectively what they call a hard barrier there, or a soft barrier, literally. People can come in that way and then just come to England, or do they reinforce it? That doesn't happen. And they've obviously been considerable time in the last 20 years between Northern Ireland and Ireland to have a much more settled agreement. They appear to be much more coherent in terms of conversation and dialogue these days. But Brexit is pushing that back the other way. The situation crisis happening, which again is driven by need for food or a need for a better life, because where they've come from is very difficult.
Finger pointing everywhere, wherever you look. They're getting everybody to point fingers and just be so distracted by the smaller things in life that this is the point I'm getting at. It goes on in every single country. They're keeping the finger pointing going on, so you're not really looking at the greater picture of why your food price just went up 20%.
Yeah.
Thought the inflation rate was 2%. And even that's just straight up theft from the central bank. So when they say inflation rate's 2%, I interpret that in English as 2% theft every year of my wages. But regardless of that 2% theft or 2% inflation, whichever way you want to term, it's the same exact thing happening. 2%, but then suddenly food rises 20, 23%. How did that happen? How'd that sneak right in there? Yeah. Why is nobody talking about that?
I work as a department leader within a retail chain. So, yeah, I see those effects at the shelf edge. I see those prices going up. I see, corporations effectively trying to merge and buy each other out because they're trying to bring down the price of food so it's kept at a manageable level. Again, what you're saying there is that it perhaps is to hide that effect of what's going to go on.
Could be. And if I could string 3 points together that you were just talking about in one lump sum.
Go for it.
Alternative View 10 opened my eyes to a lot of different things, especially the dates where many of these programs need to be implemented by. The United Defense Force and the EU there, that's going to be taking a deeper shape and a more cohesive unit by 2023. The Rapid Response Force highway system, expressway system for the Rapid Response Force needs to be completed by 2023. The rollout of 5G needs to be completed by 2023. And, after listening to David Ellis explain what this whole integrated EU Defense Force was, and then I took it to study this a little further, and what I found, there's a branch off of this called the European Friendly Neighborhood Policy. Well, this gets the EU straight down into North Africa and the exact same areas where the Romans were growing grains to send back to Rome during the height of the Roman Empire. It was much rainier and much wetter back then. In the presentation, I talked about the rain cycles returning to North Africa. So how is this EU United Defense Force going to occupy North Africa, right in the same grain-growing belts that the Romans had? More rain now, grain's coming back. Libya got incredible production. Tunisia this year, all-time record production. And then somehow, northern 55 north and above in the Ural Mountains, terrible planting this year. Bulgaria just got flooded out, half the corn. France just got ripped across with that that cyclonic bombogenesis that took out whatever crops were in the field that had emerged. America's down 58%. It's the lowest crop planting. Even back, you have to go back prior to 1938 in America to find the least amount of crops. And China just lost 30% because of this ravaging, armyworm invasion there. They're eating everything alive. Literally, this old armyworm is going off the hook. So we have major crop loss on the corn side of things. The wheat's not doing much better, but then we got all these united fronts coming through to occupy grow zones in North Africa. And here's the kicker. That date, 2023, let that stick in your mind. Because this is the first years that myself and everybody I talk with talk about the first global food shortages happening, to the point where, and it's going to be so far in the face that it's going to cause panic. And this is when we're going to see some real shifts in our society. Are these exact same dates, 2023 and 24? That would explain the Rapid Response Force and the completion of the highway system in the EU, because there's going to be breakaway countries and people protesting all over the place, and they're going to have quickly to get into the EU to control the EU citizens. It's not about an invasion. Come on, that's going to be suppress the citizens inside the EU. And I'll leave it there.
No, there's a really interesting point here. So, I guess, I'm not sure if I have the slides available. Perhaps you could send me them. I'm talking about the one that David Ellis sent.
And here's my research that I did on that. This is crazy here. if they were to get the grain growing zones, what the Romans used, the primary water source from Libya set out a massive irrigation project across North Africa. They could grow more grains than all of North America combined if they had the right water source, because the rain's above ground with the rainfalls increasing.
Yes.
So think about that. It won't matter if the rest of the planet goes offline or huge amounts of Northern Europe go offline and Canada goes offline and parts of China. Who cares? They're going to have a whole new something bigger than all of North America combined in Northern Africa.
So this is when you say offline, you're talking about the food production, aren't you? The agriculture production.
Yeah, agriculture production going offline. There's very many forecasts out there. You can just find this anywhere on the net about what's anticipated in the grand solar minimum circa 2023, 24. There'll be very little production coming out of Canada or the northern states of the United States. There'll be very little production coming out of China. They're already starting to see losses. North Korea as well. And 55 north in Europe, anywhere above there, Ural Mountains, that whole area, going to be taken pretty much offline. Parts of Australia, parts of South America, they don't grow so much down that further Tierra del Fuego tip, but Brazilian agriculture will be affected along with Argentinian. So one place goes offline, you need a replacement. This is the most brilliant chessboard move I've ever heard of. How many years whoever would have thought of it? All these plays that they need to get all these people out of there depopulated so they can go in and get a whole new grow zone.
Yeah, you look at the biggest scheme of things, that appears to be, that's a big game of chess.
That is a game of chess, but here's the game where they knew the grand solar minimum was coming, so you just leave it down to that. They knew these changes were coming, and they've already been preparing for them.
Yeah,
that's the whole kicker right there. They knew it was coming. Why aren't they warning anybody? Why aren't they telling us this is coming?
Yeah, so where I was going to go with which presentation came first is that, of course, there was that you used both a very similar map of Europe and which contained Africa in regards to what the EU Defence Union has said that it wants to do in regards to Africa, and it particularly highlighted areas where they want to go and they want to what's the word for it they used, expand into the Africas. And David Ellis obviously presented that chart that was which was an EU document that presented that, and then when we laid it over with what the presentation that you did, and that it's interesting that it really was the same areas of regards to where food growth is going, particularly where China is investing, in regards to what is now the growing green areas. They appear to be the same belts that they're after. So yes, it does appear to be, on the whole, that's the areas the EU wants to get into. That's the areas where China wants to get into, because that's where future agriculture is going to be, because it has to be in order to continue their culture. So that there's almost like a hidden fight for survival that's happening between where do we need to invest, where do we need to buy up, because, heck, we've got to survive.
You think the Ukraine was just about politics? It's the biggest grain-growing belt in Central Europe there, period. Nothing bigger. It's the largest grain producer right in that area of Europe. I
did see, obviously, I follow IT a fair bit, and they were talking about the arrangements with China and Russia in particular. So Russia, despite this fact it's under all these economic sanctions, has flipped its economy into, and it's the largest agriculture grower in the world, and it's growing an absolute surplus of stock and obviously selling it to China, and that's now one of the biggest trade deals that's happened in the last 5 years. That's huge, and it ties in very well into what you're saying, is that whole area of like a lower end of Russia, it's this huge grain belt of crops that they can grow and export. And I think that's why essentially like countries like the US, like Europe, because I guess they want those same areas as well.
Take a look at Kazakhstan, clear out. It's on the western border of China or the far east of Russia. Another huge grain grower, and guess who's in there helping them revamp their agriculture so they can almost double their output? China and Russia. So what's going to be more valuable for you? A cubic meter of natural gas, a barrel of oil, or a ton of food? Well,
the ton of food is very short term prospect as to how long it will last. But I guess you've got to flip your agriculture growth. You have to turn it to be vertical. You've got to grow in the smallest amount of space. I'll be honest with you. So when I came across vertical farming and the likes of growing indoors, probably about 2008, 2009, I became aware of an independent documentary that was aired called The Zeitgeist Addendum, and Zeitgeist Moving Forward.
Saw that too.
In regards to vertical farming, rather that's where they were looking to go. It was like one of the solutions for the world being the way that it is. And I was very much aware of that, and I kind of got involved with that on a ground level here in Nottingham. And I was like, okay, so what? I don't really know anything to how to implement it. It appears rather simple. It almost appears that we could, transform places like car parks or abandoned buildings into like indoor farms, effectively, with the right lighting conditions and growing. And I've kind of wondered, in 10 years, how come we haven't done that if this is coming? Taking abandoned spaces and turning them into, corporations or companies of, why haven't we gone into full-born, new agriculture technologies?
I asked myself the same question, and the only thing I can think of that these facilities are being built in secret, that if they did start massive infrastructure projects to build out such, and there were billions of dollars in companies jumping in, that would also send up a big red flag, like, why would they do that? It's so easy to grow these vegetables outdoors. Why would you set up and spend millions of dollars to put an indoor facility inside there? So I'm saying if it is being done, it's being done with private companies that don't have any eyes on them, that don't have any stockholders or shareholders meetings to be beholden to where they have to present what they're doing. I bet it's a lot of private money doing this, because I know some guys in Tennessee, and they also operate in Kentucky. What they do is they take disused mine shafts, the horizontal ones, not the vertical ones, but the horizontal mine shafts. Could be anything, because there's been a lot of mining in the last couple hundred years in the United States. We'll take an old disused mine shaft or a cave or parts of something into the ground, and then they'll set that up for you in there. And that's kind of their business, what they do. Get the humidity control right, try to figure out what plants are going to grow well inside there, get up the all-in-one LED spectrum grow lights put in, and then get the right electrical supply to you out there. So you can have, they're trying to couple it with fish farming, because a lot of time in these mines, they got water seeps and stuff coming in there. So they try to develop it where they'll actually dig some area out, concrete it in, put the fish in there, and then have this whole system recirculating where, the fertilizer from the fish is coming down and dripping through the tubes, and they're getting that all indoor, completely protectable, and in no way, shape, or form will be damaged by hail or high winds. But it's a very specialty niche type of thing. But you know what? Their business is really expanding as of late.
Yeah, aquaponics, I think it's called, isn't it? The way you...
Yeah, with the fish when you add it in. But what I do out on my back patio out here is I just have the vertical grow tubes. Now, you ask to set one of these things up. It's an octagon-shaped tube made out of stainless steel, and then inside there's two flat braces, and then you pull the coconut coir between them, and actually it sandwiches in there. On the outside, there's 13 different holes down the front of the tube, and you just split open there's a special tool. It's made out of I wouldn't say stainless, but a little bit harder steel. Where you poke it in, you twist it, and it opens a hole, and you just put your seeds in there or plant roots in there. Turn it back up, and then everything's on a timer, and we water for 15 minutes for every 2 hours. Okay. That thing turns on. It's a DC motor. That's very important to draw water up. DC is far better. So it's a DC motor, and it's gravity fed, so the DC motor just pulls the water up, and it's a hose that's sort of slight angle, and it goes down all the 8 tubes, and then after the 15 minutes, whatever water's in there just starts to drip down, and it's all gravity fed, and when it comes out of the bottom, it just goes back to the recirculating tank. So right now we're about using, say, 20 liters per month to be able to grow. So what kind of water issues are another big thing. Water issues are huge. So if you can grow an enormous amount of plants recirculating water like that, why not?
So you talk about there appears to be a concerted effort also to buy up water supplies, or even to dam them off from country to country, particularly where there's a river flows from one country into another. There's particular efforts, certainly some African countries, to literally dam them up so they don't flow into the next area. And there's a powerful documentary came out about 2010, and it was called The Fight for Water, or Blue Water. That was really interesting, how that's happening, particularly across the developing world, how nations and states, even counties, I think there was a county in India, is stopping water from going from one area into the next just because it wants to become its own state eventually at one time. And I can see that happening. I think it was areas of Ukraine do that as well. I think there's a major river that comes through. I could be wrong. How they're damming it up so it doesn't flow downstream to their neighbour. Worrying stuff is that keeping fresh water fresh, because obviously a lot of water is just being fed into the ocean. So did you see that as well? Do you see keeping fresh water fresh? Is that a powerful issue that you're seeing in the Eastern world?
The pollution is off the hook out in places like China. and other places that don't have so much environmental regulation, like Cambodia, Vietnam, it's just by the wayside as the water is a secondary concern. We have much more understanding of the pollution water, but in China they understand it now too, because it's starting to affect the health of just out of the, so far off the hook cancer rates out there that you're just born and you get cancer and you die pretty much now in China. It's so polluted everywhere from the air to the water, but they've understood it, that the roots uptake that too. So they're really trying their best to keep the water cleaner. There's been a lot of new regulations. I'll give China credit. There's a lot of new regulation. They just can't pour straight up whatever into the river anymore. If they get caught, they get arrested, and some of them get executed. But by and large, it's still guanxi, and whoever pays the most amount of money in bribes doesn't get seen. Oh, sorry, gifts. You got to call it a gift. So whoever gives a gift to the inspectors, even if they're blowing like blue dye into the river, is something that they did from some cadmium process, run over the treatment of leather into whatever, and it comes out the backside all contaminated and polluted, and it's blue. If it goes in the river, if I give you a bag of money, you won't see the blue color, and if anything happens, you'll go ahead and stick the police and the dogs on the and it's still like that.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Wow. So yeah, I think I saw a video that was very similar to that, how it was a leather factory, and all the was on the floor. I literally was running down the drain into the river out the back, and it was like, damn. and like you're right, that's what they just said. They just pay them off, so it doesn't matter. They just carry on. Crazy.
Yeah, the thing about the citizens organizing over there too. So they don't want it to appear that there's any fracturing in society. So you got some of these dishonest countryside officials. They're doing what you're saying. They're letting everything run in the river. They get caught. The people are caught because they were taking. So then the citizens, people like you and me, we come out on the street and start saying, hey, you got all the stuff running in the river. I can't get my farm. All the dog, whatever's all sick. Everybody. So instead of actually going up to the next level to take it to, all right, let's talk about this, they bring their private security police thugs in there to beat up all the. And if they try to leave and go to a city capital to lodge a complaint, which they can do legally, or if they try to go to Beijing and lodge a complaint legally, they have their private security actually abduct them off trains and stop them from traveling to be able to lodge a complaint in a larger district, because then real people will start to come back and look. So they have their own little kingdoms and fiefdoms going on there, which is still kind of strange. Well, how they can prevent people from actually going out to and lodge complaints by literally keeping them home where they can't actually go do it. It still goes on to this day. Really, it's a really strange way it works over there, but water's a main contentious issue, and they've been exploring for a lot of something called primary water, which Deborah Tavares talked about at the AB10 conference.
Yeah.
So think about a tree, and the tree comes up from all the roots from underground, and it comes up to the trunk. Well, if you rip that tree out of the ground, you got all those roots that are all over the place. I'll plunk it back in. All those roots are being fed, and let's say at the end of one of those roots is an aquifer. It could be something coming out of the side of a mountain. Could be actual pools of water under the earth or whatever it is. But that all is leading back to a primary source that's recharging, because they find that some of these aquifers, they're recharging, but they're recharging faster than what could be from the rainfall from above.
Yeah, that's right. They're not refilling fast enough, are they? That's
yeah. Some are refilling way faster than anticipated too. Like there's some oil wells that refill really fast as well. That's from pressure from some other source pushing it in there.
Yeah.
So they call this primary water because that's coming from like a main trunk vein. And what you see way out there at the end of an aquifer is just like the tip of an end of a root off the bottom of the root ball on a tree. So what they're trying to do is trace these back to where the original like trunk water source is. And there's a couple around the world. It's called primary water, and I encourage you to look into this.
I will do, yeah.
Primary water sources. And there's one in Libya.
Ah.
There's one in China as well. And there's two in the United States. And you start to take a look at these areas around the world where there's Argentina has one. And it's kind of there's only been 4 or 5 of these identified across the planet. They call them primary water sources. Deborah Tavares has done a real amazing amount of study on where these are located, how governments are, drawing from these sources, but it's still all about control, because we're told it's a finite resource. It only comes from above. It can get polluted. But there's 3 times more water in the crust of our Earth than there are on all the oceans and lakes and rivers combined on the surface that we're seeing, as you go swimming in the lake or whatever you do, canoeing on a river.
I didn't know that.
There's 3 times more water under the crust of the Earth than there is in all the oceans combined. So that seeps out in some places, this other water. So Noah's Flood's a good one, too. Because Noah's Flood, these accounts talking about water just spurting out of the Earth, and obviously there was something going on with the Earth's crust having some ripping or tearing, and this water just starts flowing out. Plus they had the huge amount of rain from above. So I'm saying this had something to do with something in the solar cycle was going on that was much heavier and more powerful. Maybe it was like a once in a 6,000 year event or 12,000 year event, something like this. But it was recorded as water coming from the Earth itself coming out, flooding, and also from above.